The guy that wrote this book I'm reading out of right now was crucified upside down.
Upside down? Where did you get that from? I mean, he's talking about Jesus, right? He's reading from the Bible. You think Jesus was crucified upside down? I mean, I had to jump through hoops and do ridiculous amounts of research, all sourced and cited in my book, by the way, owenmorgan.com, if you want to find it, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses. I had to do all kinds of crazy research just to prove the dude was crucified, like on a cross and not a stake. He was, by the way. It was on a cross, not a stake. How did you come to the conclusion, you, of all people, that he was crucified upside down? What are you talking about? By the way, the way that we know that Jesus was crucified on a cross, it was a crucifixion rather than, a death by hanging from a stake. The way we know that is because the Epistle of Barnabas, it wasn't included in the Bible, but it's considered to be legitimate literature from a certain time. It was written at a certain specific time around that time frame. The Epistle of Barnabas was, and it describes Jesus as being hung up like the mast of a ship. So the problem with a lot of common things in the ancient world is they were so common that people didn't bother describing them. Like, what was the point? Everybody knew. When you say he was crucified, for example, everybody knows exactly what that is and how it works. Everybody knows that you put like one hand through, or what you put one nail through this hand, one nail through that hand, and you put the platform, and then build the blah, blah, blah. We don't know that, though. We don't know how it worked here in this world today because no one bothered to describe it. Diaries are of great value to historians because people will describe things in vivid detail in diaries, for example. Like there's this old device. God, I forget what it's called. Oh, here. Yes, here it is. Oh my God, right here. Okay. I found this interesting meme or whatever on Reddit the other day. And it's a picture of two guys, if you're just listening, two guys and a weird looking object in between them. Look what I made. It's a ... one of them says. The next one says, say no more. It's obvious. We don't even need to write it down. Archaeologists today. What did they use it for? That's real. I mean, that's being framed up as a joke, but that's real. That really happens. That's really a problem. Discovering or determining, figuring out if Jesus was crucified or what, how he died exactly, or how anybody would have died at the time, not just Jesus, but anybody, is a challenge. It's something that scholars had to dig through literature to figure out. Old literature. And the best evidence that we have, not the only evidence, but the most readily available evidence, the piece of evidence that I use to prove that it was a crucifixion, is that the Epistle of Barnabas describes it as Jesus hanging on an object that looked like the mast of a ship, basically. Jesus was hung to look like he was on the mast of a ship. Also, the book of John uses the plural word for nail, so multiple nails. And it seems like there would only be one nail necessary if it were a stake, for example. So anyway, it's just kind of an interesting little fun fact, an interesting rabbit hole to go down. The point behind the whole commentary that I'm making here, though, is this. Where the hell did Greg Locke get the idea that Jesus was hung upside down? He has absolutely no reason to believe that. There's debate as to whether a platform was placed under the people on the crosses, or if their feet were nailed into the cross. We don't know. We have no idea how this happened. It would make sense for a platform to be placed under it because it would make it harder for basically you got to put the nails through the radius and the ulna bones to prevent it from ripping, through or whatever. You got to put it through two major bones. And it was a very common method of torture in the ancient world, in ancient Rome. So it wasn't just Jesus. So you had to put it through two major bones. But the question is, was that enough? We don't know. We've never, as humans, in the modern era, we have never crucified anybody. So we don't know how exactly it would work. There's suspicion that maybe, on the part of scholars, maybe they put a little platform that was just a little bit too short, so you had to stand on your tippy toes to support your weight. There's a suspicion that maybe that happened. And that would prevent it from ripping through your radius and ulna bones. There's suspicion that maybe they stood on the ground. There's suspicion that maybe, God, imagine having an itch in that situation, right? Suspicion that maybe their feet were nailed into the cross. I mean, there are all kinds of ideas about this stuff. And very few answers. The only answers that we really have is that they used two nails, one through each arm, through the radius and the ulna, and it was in the shape of the mast of a ship. Basically, that's all we know. Any other information added in, like Greg Locke is trying to do here, is made up. It's fabricated nonsense. Rome had some insane methods of torture and execution. Oh, yes. And the crucifixion was one of the worst, in my opinion. It was bad. Jesus Christ. Wait, Peter was crucified upside down? Was he? How do we know that? Is that... Oh, wait a minute. Is Greg Locke talking about Peter? Because he's just reading from the book of Peter. Is he saying the guy that wrote this book, Peter, was crucified upside down? Maybe that's who he was talking about, not Jesus. That could be my mistake. Interesting. Okay. Maybe they described Peter as being crucified upside down. I'm not sure. Either way, we know very little about the execution method itself.
The guy that wrote this book I'm reading out of right now was crucified upside down.
Okay. Talking about Peter, I guess. Thank you for clarifying that. Let me see if I can find the evidence for that or where it came from or whatever. I have a Google Chrome plugin that tells me the credibility of a source. It's been super useful. Okay, I'm looking at all of my traditional standard sources that I'd go to for like information on this, and I'm not finding anything on it. Here. Wait. I think I've got something here. Here. Take a look at this. It was widely known among Christians that Peter had suffered a martyr's death. The tradition is alluded to in the book of First Clement. Quote, because of unjust jealousy, Peter bore up under hardships not just once or twice, but many times, and having thus borne his witness, or having been martyred, is what that means, he went to the place of glory that he deserved, i.e., I guess, heaven, right? First Clement 5:4. I've never heard of Clement before. The first epistle of Clement. Apparently, it's apocryphal. Now, apparently, it's real. Not like it's not a forgery. It's just it wasn't included in like the canon texts, I guess. It's a codex, which means that it was written on back and front, as opposed to a scroll, which was just written on the front. Interesting. Okay. So then it says, 100 years later, Tertullian speaks of Peter enduring a passion like the Lord's, possibly referring to the tradition that Peter was crucified. This became the firm tradition of later times that Peter, along with his companion, the Apostle Paul, had been martyred during the persecution of the Emperor Nero. Yeah, Nero was absolutely terrible to Christians. He put 2 spaces in here. He should have put 1. According to this tradition, Peter's death came by crucifixion and in a rather bizarre manner. He'd been crucified upside down with his head to the ground. This tradition is later reported in Eusebius, who says that Peter came to Rome where he was crucified head downward at his own request. Church History 3:1. But its earliest occurrence appears in the 2nd century Acts of Peter, which tells the famous Quo Vadis story of Peter returning to Rome in order to be crucified. There appears to be some standing for it, some reason to believe it. The death of Peter by execution is already alluded to in the Gospel of John, which evidently then had been written after the event occurred. Yeah, Book of John was written in about 110 CE, 110 CE. So about 70 years after Jesus died, 70, 80 years, give or take. When you were younger, you girded yourself and walked wherever you wanted, but when you grow old, you will reach out your hands, and another will bind you and lead you where you do not want to go. 21:18. The author concludes this quotation by noting, he said this to signify the kind of death he wanted to experience to glorify God. It's clear that Peter's being told he'll be executed as opposed to dying of natural causes, and that this will be the death of a martyr. He will glorify God. Some interpreters have thought that the reference is more specific than that the author is indicating that Peter will be crucified. The argument is that the text speaks of the immobilization of the hands, which may refer to being nailed or tied to a cross. Such an interpretation is possible, but it should be pointed out that the binding of the hands appears to occur before Peter is to be led off to be executed. This is textual criticism. This is how textual criticism works. That's what Bart Ehrman is. He's a textual critic. Peter's death in the Acts of Peter. It was one of the most interesting tales in the Acts of Peter. If you recall, according to the book, Peter had incensed two of the most powerful men in Rome by his preaching of sexual continence. The concubines of the ruling prefect, Agrippa, and the wife of the emperor's friend, Albinus, refused any longer to have any sexual relationships with them. In their pique, the men decide to go after Peter. I see. So Peter convinced the women to stop sleeping with them because it was morally wrong, and then they got angry and went after him. That's what I'm picking up here. Albinus's wife, Xanthippe, learns of the plot, however, and warns Peter to flee the city. He's reluctant to do so, but his fellow Christians finally persuade him. As he was walking through the city gate, however, he sees Jesus coming in. Perplexed, he asks him, "Lord, where are you going?" In Latin, "Quo vadis?" Jesus replies that he is going to Rome to be crucified. Peter is confused. "Lord, are you being crucified again?" And Jesus replies, "Yes, Peter, again I shall be crucified." Peter then wakes up as if from a dream, sees Jesus ascend to heaven, and realizes that he must return to the city to be captured and crucified in Jesus' stead. Acts of Peter 35. Interesting. That's the story. Again, non-canonical. So Peter meets up with his Christian companions, tells them his plan, and urges them not to be angry with the prefect Agrippa, since this is the Lord's will. And when the moment comes, he asks to be crucified upside down. This is not because, as some later interpreters would have it, he felt unworthy to be killed in the same way as his Lord, for he himself indicates what is meant by the upside-down crucifixion. It's a symbolic statement about the nature of earthly existence and our human need to look past the appearances of life to the realities that they reveal. This idea is conveyed in an address that Peter gives from the cross after he's nailed, hanging upside down. He speaks to the onlookers about the mystery of the whole creation, which itself is all topsy-turvy. Okay, that doesn't even sound real. I'm sorry. This doesn't sound real. This sounds like a story that was told for religious reasons, not historical reasons. Also, it wouldn't take long before you pass out if you're crucified upside down. In fact, that'd probably be the preferred way of being crucified upside down, because the blood would all rush to your head and you would pass out and it'd be over from there. Seems to me. I mean, I'm no medical expert. It just seems like it to me. He speaks to the onlookers about the mystery of the whole creation, which itself is all topsy-turvy. For when the first man, Adam, came into the world, he came head first, as do newborns. That means that Adam's perspective as the one who brought sin into the world. Wait, Adam wasn't a newborn. He wasn't born into the world. What? He was created. What do you mean he came in head first, as newborns do? Adam was never a baby, was he? According to modern day lore. That's weird. I mean, the story of Adam and Eve is not real. They didn't differentiate between legend, fact, and myth in antiquity literature like the book of Genesis. So it's just a bunch of campfire stories about their creation, basically, about their origin stories. Antiquity literature is the Roman name. The Greek name is archaeological literature, archaeology literature, something like that. That means that Adam's perspective as one who brought sin into the world was entirely reversed and upside down. That's why people seem to think that what is true is false and what is false is true. What is right seems wrong, what's wrong is right. What is real appears fake, and what is fake real. All of this because humans have reverse vision due to the actions of Adam, the first man. The word Adam means soil, ground. Just the whole thing drives me nuts. By hanging upside down, however, Peter sees things correctly. What is to us right is to him left. What is to us up is to him down, and so forth. People need to acquire this new vision of reality in our world. Those who are in Christ recognize that the values and priorities and loves and passions of this world are all wrong. But there is an alternative set of values, priorities, loves, and passions. Those that come from God. Christians are to adhere to these, even though they seem opposite to what the rest of the world embraces. Interesting. There's an alternative set of values, priorities, loves, and passions. Those that come from God. I don't know what he means by that. Again, this story doesn't sound real. It sounds like a fiction created similar to the fictions created in the book of Revelation or the book of Daniel. It sounds like an apocalypse almost. Not exactly, but a little. Peter, having said his piece, dies. In an interesting aftermath, his friend Marcellus provides for him an expensive and elaborate burial. Peter has to return from the dead to upbraid his friend for not understanding his message. Since all things are reversed, as he has just gone to lengths to explain while dying, it is not wealth that is to be valued, for example, in expensive funeral arrangements, but poverty, and not death that is to be shunned, but life. Wow, that's really interesting. So those were from apocryphal books about Peter. Not apocryphal. When I say apocryphal, it may have a certain connotation. Non-canonical books. Those were from the books of the Acts of Peter and First Clement, it appears. That's really interesting. So anyway, was Peter hung upside down from a cross? In my opinion, the answer is no, probably not. And if he was, I would venture to guess that it was not at his request. It was just like the way that it was done. But that's just, that's just me guessing. That's not like any verified knowledge, so.